Hello, everyone. Tonight we are stepping into one of the strangest and sleepiest corners of Roman history, so strange. In fact, you may find yourself yawning halfway through just thinking about it. Sandals slap against the marble floor in slow, respectful rhythm. Everything glows. Everything echoes. Courtiers pass in silence, their expressions locked somewhere between awe and indigestion. And just beyond those velvet curtains is him. But like most ridiculous imperial edicts, there's something deliciously human buried under all the scrolls and statues. That's okay. Just be glad you're not doing it in front of a certain emperor. You're standing in a golden hallway lit by flickering oil lamps that smell faintly of cedar and ambition. The man who once tried to make it illegal, yes, illegal for Romans to yawn in public. You probably won't survive this, not because it's dangerous, but because it's that boring. And bizarre. Historians will later argue whether he truly existed or if he was a mashup of other emperors with too many personality flaws and not enough statues. You pass a pair of noblemen mid-conversation. He outlawed what, exactly? One whispers. The other glances around nervously. Yawning, he hisses. This was a city where they believed garlic could ward off leprosy and where flamingo tongues were served as appetizers. He says it's the gateway to sedition. Every corner of it screams, "Please admire me," from the ivory inlays to the excessively carved lion paws. His robes are pristine to pristine and his gaze is focused, almost offended by the natural state of human relaxation. But tonight he's very real and very cranky. And not just because it's impolite. It wasn't theatrical, it wasn't even audible. But it was there, undeniable, and in that moment something cracked. He questioned priests, philosophers, and for some reason a very sleepy cat. Oh no, in his mind it's subversive. It's a sign of boredom. And boredom to Tiberinus is the beginning of rebellion. Because it turns out this wasn't the first time Tiberinus had gotten weird about bodily behavior. A small boy walks by selling roasted nuts and keeps whispering, "No yawning." Because if this new rule becomes law, the entire empire could change. Imagine a world where fatigue is considered a crime. 27 paragraphs of vaguely threatening legalese that no one really understands, but everyone is afraid to challenge. Where the simple involuntary act of stretching your jaw too wide is read as treason. No yawning, as if it's a prayer or a spell. A dog yawns near a statue and is promptly shooed away. Years earlier, during his time as a junior magistrate, he had attempted to ban nose-picking during Saturnalia festivities. A known punishment for minor offenses where you must recite bad poetry to a room of indifferent guards. That didn't pass, but it did earn him the nickname Judas Maximus among the younger legionnaires. The emperor rises slowly. The servant, already pale, whispers, "It was a hiccup, sire." Or perhaps just the cumulative drowsiness of a people told not to be tired. The other lets out a breathy wheeze that suspiciously sounds like the start of a yawn, but he clamps his mouth shut in terror. That's when you know something here is off. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is over there. As he regains balance, he opens his mouth slightly too wide. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft background music, and let's enjoy our evening ride together. You shuffle past a pair of Roman guards who have clearly been awake far too long. One rubs his eyes. Well, at least sheep don't yawn in the forum. You've entered the court of Emperor Tiberinus the Stern, one of Rome's lesser-known but undoubtedly more eccentric rulers. The air is thick with rose oil, goat cheese, and tension. You think that's absurd, and you'd be right. But Rome wasn't exactly running on common sense in those days. And here, in this marbled nest of paranoia and performance, one man's obsession was slowly transforming into a law. Tiberinus sits atop a throne that looks more like an uncomfortable sculpture than a seat of power. He hates yawning. Earlier that day, during a meeting with regional governors, he had watched wide-eyed and motionless as one delegate from Hispania let slip a small restrained yawn. He ordered the scrolls brought to him. He demanded testimony from palace physicians. And all of them had the same disappointing answer. Yawning is natural. But Tiberinus wouldn't accept that. Natural, he spat, is what sheep do before the butcher's knife. One senator, hoping to lighten the mood, muttered under his breath he was reassigned to Sardinia by nightfall. But to understand the emperor's rage, you have to rewind a little. There was also that infamous cucumber edict. where any tried to limit the number of times citizens could mention their own diets in public. So by the time he set his imperial sights on Yawning, the court had learned to expect eccentricity. You sit quietly on a long stone bench beneath a fresco of Mars wrestling a giant snake that may or may not be metaphorical. All of it is absurd, yes, but underneath the absurdity is fear. Already the palace scribes are murmuring about a draft. Lex Occitantus, the law against Yawning. One clause, according to rumor, reads, "Let no citizen, servant, senator, or stable boy exhibit the yawn in presence of the emperor under pain of fine, flogging, or forced storytelling." Yes, storytelling. Outside, the city of Rome hums on. But inside this gilded paranoia trap, you sense something building. An undercurrent of resistance, maybe. And then, as if summoned by your thought, a servant stumbles while carrying a tray of figs. Silence. All heads turn. Tiberinus narrows his eyes. He says nothing. But the next morning, the servant is reassigned to a lighthouse in Crete. You look up at the imperial ceiling, painted with stars and abstract gods, and suddenly feel an overwhelming need to yawn. You try to hold it back. You fail. It's going to be a long night. You try to make it discreet, just a soft, tight-lipped flex of the jaw, but the second your yawn escapes, a low-ranking palace official shuffles over with the terrified urgency of someone carrying both a message and a bladder problem. He bows awkwardly. You appear fatigued, citizen. He doesn't accuse. And not just the courtiers, but the marble busts stern and cracked, frowning from their perches like disappointed ancestors. You'd give anything for a good excuse right now. Maybe you were just cold. Maybe you saw a ghost. Maybe ... allergies? He warns. The one that would eventually lead to an imperial decree, public trials, and the quiet humiliation of a senator whose only crime was being awake since dawn and extremely bored. You nod politely and pretend to study a nearby potted laurel. But it's too late. The eyes of the court are on you now. The senator, whose name you later learn is Marius Balbinus, sits slouched in his marble chair, legs twitching from too much wine and not enough progress. He's been listening to a turgid speech about aqueduct maintenance for nearly 3 hours. The speaker, an overzealous bureaucrat with a deep love for limestone, drones on about pipe diameters and flow rates. But before you can speak, a trumpet sounds a shrill, one-note thing that announces absolutely nothing except, someone spent too much money on this. A goblet clinks to the floor. Somewhere in the rafters, a pigeon flaps violently. Even the limestone enthusiast falters mid-sentence. Some say it's a later exaggeration. Others argue that Tiberinus used it as a convenient excuse to crack down on senatorial behavior. But no matter how it started, what followed was very real. The shift in imperial focus from law and order to personal decorum. And with that, the room shifts. Everyone straightens. What happened in there is still unclear. Some whisper he was made to sit through a reading of Cicero's driest legal opinions. By dusk, street performers were reenacting the yawn of Balbinus in taverns and alleyways. By dawn, they were being arrested. Others say he was simply stared at for 6 hours by a man with impossibly small ears, and utterly fascinated by his presence at all times. A yawn, to him, was not fatigue. It was insult, rebellion, a subtle flapping middle finger. He thought it meant oculus colitis hot eye, thought it was a reference to his father's squint. You eavesdrop. Either way, he emerged pale, quiet, and with noticeably better posture. Remember when he banned the word, okay? The crowd parts. And at the far end of the hall, you see it happen. The yawn. Not yours this time, but the yawn. It unfolds like a tragedy in slow motion. Balbinus twitches, shifts, licks his lips. 100 paces. That's the length of a small basilica. Or about 3 giraffes if you're translating into sleep-deprived hallucinations. Quietly, but still acts of wakefulness. What even is that? And then mouth open, eyes shut, jaw tilted to the gods, he yawns. The following day, you witness a man standing on a podium at dawn, loudly reciting multiplication tables while balancing an amphora on his head. Another walks laps around the forum with pebbles in his shoes, loudly declaring how awake and engaged he feels. You could fit a whole pomegranate in that yawn. Time freezes. And that, he adds while chewing, is how you end up reassigned to goat census duty. You don't want to know. Between bites of suspiciously undercooked eel and fig jelly, the host announces, starting tomorrow, we'll be issued yawn journals. To record when we feel one coming and how we resist it. The Emperor rises. He says nothing. Instead, he stares at Balbinus with such cold, silent judgment that you feel secondhand shame just witnessing it. Now, historians still debate whether this moment actually occurred as described in the single surviving scroll that references it. Everyone's wide-eyed, stiff-backed, blinking too often. No one wants to be the first to crack. It's a contest of artificial alertness. Someone chuckles at a joke that wasn't told. Someone else drops a fork from gripping it too tightly. After the session, Balbinus was escorted, not arrested, but escorted to a side chamber known as the Hall of Reflection. The story spread fast. It's a half-written draft of the newest proclamation, still smeared in fresh ink and panic. Because now, something had shifted in Tiberinus's mind. He'd even handed what he believed was proof that even the highest among Rome's elite could not be trusted to remain alert, respectful, and he would not tolerate it. Meanwhile, you found your way into the palace's quieter wing, where a few leftover senators are mumbling their post-meeting gripes over wine and olives. "I told you he was unstable," mutters one, chewing like a goat. "That was a misunderstanding," another replies. They pause. And then, just for a moment, a sneaky yawn slips from the youngest among them. He freezes mid-bite. The others lean in. "Don't you dare," one hisses. "Hold it in or bite your tongue off." It's safer. But it's too late. The sound reaches the hallway. A servant dashes by with a look of dread and drops a scroll at your feet. You bend down to pick it up. Let it be known, those who yawn within 100 paces of imperial personage shall be judged as openly contemptuous and disloyal to the Roman order. You reread the words. More troubling still is the footnote at the bottom. Offenders may be required to perform 3 public acts of wakefulness to redeem reputation. You chuckle. Turns out the palace is already testing the idea. It's all becoming farce. But the most surreal moment comes that evening when you're invited to a dinner with mid-tier officials. You ask what happens if someone forgets to record a yawn. Then it's considered secret dissent, your host says, deadpan. You don't ask where that takes place. Instead, you glance around the room. This, you realize, is the beginning of something ridiculous and deeply Roman. An empire once built on legions and law is now obsessing over mouth movements. And the weirdest part? It's only just getting started. You've decided to stay low literally. Sitting half-hidden behind a faded tapestry of Neptune high-fiving a dolphin, you watch as the court rolls into another day of absurdity. Today, they're handing out scrolls. Each one is rolled tight with a wax seal shaped like a yawning lion, possibly ironic, possibly the work of a bored scribe with a sense of humor he should not have. A functionary announces that these are copies of the behavior mandate as decreed by our most vigilant and alert Emperor Tiberinus the Stern. And there he is again, Tiberinus, reclining stiffly on his absurdly uncomfortable throne, expression tight enough to snap a stylus. Not that he'd ever relax enough to recline. That's just how the throne was made. Painfully. Not to be confused with Tiberius, his vastly more famous and only marginally less paranoid predecessor. In fact, some historians have argued passionately and with wine that Tiberinus may have been a satirical character created by disgruntled scribes after Caligula's reign. Others say he was a very real man, recorded in a handful of fragmentary provincial tax logs and one extremely strange mural in Pompeii. The truth? Lost to time. But he lives on in whispers, footnotes, and possibly as the origin of every office manager who frowns when you sneeze too loud. Let's talk about him. He clawed his way up through decades of administrative grind. Loved rules. Loved the crisp lines of bureaucracy. Tiberinus had been a fiscal inspector in Capua, a censor's aide in Sicily, and according to a single, highly disputed letter, the man responsible for inventing the imperial receipt. You're allowed to hover nearby today. You were accidentally mistaken for a junior candle warden. Just nod and look busy every few minutes. Tiberinus the Stern. Except now they came with troops, laws, and fancy seals. You study his face now, not the mask he wears in court, but the man himself up close. His eyes twitch constantly, scanning for yawns like a lioness hunting antelope. His beard is trimmed to imperial perfection, exactly 1/3 of a finger's width. His mouth? Thin, tight, betraying no joy, no weariness. Only control. His skin is pale, not from sickness, but from avoiding sunlight. The man exudes authority the way an oven exudes heat, without mercy. Others said he once lost a promotion because he yawned in front of his superior during census season. One elderly cook claimed the emperor yawned once during a crucial dice game and lost a small fortune, and never forgave his own jaw. But his obsession with control didn't come from nowhere. He wasn't born to the purple. But in Rome, a strong suggestion from the emperor was like a mild suggestion from a thunderbolt. He loved order. One scholar, in a fit of caffeinated honesty, once described him as, the empire still moved, roads were still built, temples still received offerings. Life continued, just with fewer open mouths and a lot more tension. A man who would alphabetize his nightmares. Meanwhile, the palace staff had started pinching themselves to stay awake during shifts, because if he's nearsighted, that matters. He cleaned up corruption in the grain trade. He punished crooked tax collectors. He even standardized the measure of olive oil across 3 provinces. One poor scribe passed out into a pile of scrolls and was found drooling on a tax report about Etrurian sheep exports. And like so many men elevated suddenly to supreme power, Tiberinus brought his private neuroses with him. You've read some of his earlier decrees. They single quotes . Revealing. All sandals must be double knotted on imperial grounds. Grapes must not be eaten in odd numbers before sundown. Any cat observed interrupting state business shall be relocated to the coast. It reads, and of course, 3 acts of wakefulness required before sundown. May Juno grant you alertness. There, in the soft warmth of the Roman sun, you finally let yourself yawn. It feels glorious. You stretch. Birds chirp. A baker drops a tray of honey cakes nearby, but you don't even flinch. Yawns are henceforth discouraged in civic environments. That last one wasn't even a law yet, not officially. Just a strong suggestion. Still, no one really knew where it came from. Some said Tiberinus believed yawns were an invitation for demons to enter the soul, a performance. A farce with teeth. Historians still debate whether this yawn banning was a public health concern, a personal vendetta, or a slow psychological unspooling masked in legislative prose. But what's not debated? The ripple it caused. Already the Senate was on edge. The urban magistrates were floundering, trying to balance enforcement with ridicule. Still, none of them dared question the man. Because behind all his quirks, Tiberinus was terrifyingly efficient. He wasn't beloved, but he was obeyed. And that's what made his reign so strange. It was ridiculous, yes, but functional. You stand now in the Imperial Archive, room dusty, scroll-laden, and buzzing with whispered gossip. 2 scribes are arguing over punctuation. Is it no yawning within hearing distance or sight distance? One asks. The other replies, I say we just write in proximity and let the next poor fool figure it out. They both sigh. And then one yawns, a soft, slow, defeated yawn. They freeze. You freeze, everyone freezes. And then from the shadows, a steward steps forward. He carries a small bell. He rings it once, silence. He scribbles something on a wax tablet. Passes it to the yawning scribe. Yawn observed. The scribe groans. Again. Yes, the steward says, deadpan. Again, and you realize that something deeper is happening. That this isn't just a rule, it's becoming a culture. You slip out of the archive room and head toward the outer courtyard. For a moment, everything feels normal. But just as your eyes begin to close, just for a second, you hear a quiet voice beside you say, Citizen, please remain conscious. You open your eyes to see a boy no older than 12 in a tunic labeled Youth Wakefulness Monitor. He's watching you. Smiling, but watching. It's going to be a very strange empire. You wake up not from a nap, of course. That would be treasonous now, but from a state of very focused, not yawning. You're seated on a smooth bench in the Temple of Minerva, trying to soak in the cool quiet before the next absurdity unfolds. Around you, citizens wander in and out, some praying, some pretending to pray, and a few just trying to sleep with their eyes open. No one dares let their mouth open wider than a grape. Not since the scrolls started circulating. You look sleepy, stretch your arms, maybe make a weird squeaking noise. But in ancient Rome? Oh no, they couldn't leave it at that. Because now, people are asking the question, what even is a yawn? Seems simple enough. You open your mouth, air goes in. And believe me, there were many. To understand how this madness reached its bureaucratic peak, we have to dig into some of the stranger beliefs about yawning. Yawning, according to certain physicians of the day, meant an imbalance of the body's internal winds. That's right. You were leaking air. Specifically, air that was supposed to be digesting your lunch or cooling your spleen. Signals of internal decay, of weakness, of rebellion. The western wind, the account said, carries away the death fog, which sounds very poetic and also very made up. First, there's the humorous theory Rome's favorite go-to explanation for everything from headaches to bad poetry. It's the soul trying to remember its shape. A moment when the spirit briefly disconnects from the body. Everyone is nodding, not because they agree, because they don't want to argue and risk yawning. Claim that yawning was the body is a way of allowing trapped melancholy to escape. Kind of like letting the ghost set through your teeth. Very hygienic. One particularly confident scroll others believed yawning prevented death. Yes, prevented it. A lapse in loyalty? He feared being forgotten almost as much as he feared mouth breathing. A cosmic insult? Others say it was quite literal. He genuinely hated seeing people yawn and simply couldn't handle it emotionally. Pliny the Elder, bless his easily fooled soul, recorded a story in which a man survived a deadly plague simply by yawning aggressively every morning while facing west. To yawn in the presence of power is to suggest that power is boring, which, when you think about it, is quite possibly the worst insult in Roman politics. They say you must carry lemon oil in your pocket to fight the yawns or risk your place in the guild. Priests would sprinkle you with vinegar and whisper protective verses. Some versions involved hitting you lightly with a sandal, to drive the demon out gently. There were even religious implications. In rural villages, yawning without covering your mouth was said to invite wandering spirits to take up residence in your chest. So, given this buffet of bizarre theories, it is no wonder that someone like Emperor Tiberinus latched onto the idea that yawns weren't just sleepy expressions but signals. You overhear a trio of young philosophers in the forum arguing about this very thing. Yawns are just muscle spasms, says one, slouching like a particularly disappointed statue. The jaw stretches, the lungs reset. No, replies the second, smug in his spotless toga. And then the third, tall, slightly cross-eyed, speaking with the gravity of a man who owns too many sandals, says, actually, a yawn is a small death. You glance around. At this point, the idea of a yawn is more dangerous than the act itself. So the question becomes, what does it mean to yawn in front of an emperor? A sign of disrespect? The Roman elite certainly seemed to think so. One particularly dramatic senator, Cassius the Red, known for his flair and his 15 failed assassination plots, declared publicly, boring is worse than cruel. Boring is forgettable. And Emperor Tiberinus? Of course, modern historians are split. Some claim the yawn ban was symbolic and metaphor for the emperor's need to control the uncontrollable. One papyrus fragment from Alexandria records a merchant's letter to his cousin. Beware of Rome. The streets are quiet but tight with tension. They say you must carry lemon oil in your pocket to fight the yawns, or risk your place in the guild. Lemon oil, as if citrus could outmuscle human biology. But hey, it was either that or exile. Meanwhile, back in the palace, the emperor's advisors are facing a problem. How do you enforce a law that punishes something involuntary? You sit in on a strategy session. 4 men in different shades of anxious gray surround a large mosaic table, trying not to breathe through their mouths. We need a sign, one says, a gesture. Something to indicate a yawn was not meant as offense. A yawn license, suggests another, a small token carried in the sleeve. If one must yawn, they raise it first, like a sneeze guard, for the soul. Yawn license? The others repeat as though he's offered to kiss Jupiter. Yes, he insists. You quietly leave the room before the idea gets approved. Bakers pretend to whistle while secretly suppressing mid-afternoon sighs. Even the pigeons seem tenser. Out on the street, life continues. Barely. Vendors whisper their prices. And you? You're beginning to feel it. The pressure. She immediately sits up straighter and denies everything. The surreal ache of knowing that something normal has been turned into a secret crime. You pass a group of students practicing deep breathing techniques in a circle. Their instructor shouts, "Do not feel tired." You are not tired. You are vibrant, wakeful citizens of a thriving empire. Passers-by freeze. Even a guard halts mid-step. A small part of you wants to follow. One poor girl bursts into tears. Maybe 8 years old. Sitting on the steps of the Temple of Janus, wide-eyed, calm. You pat her on the shoulder. Like he knows exactly what he's doing, like he's challenging the whole empire. And now, as evening settles in over the rooftops and the light glows soft and gold across the forum, you see a small, strange sign of rebellion, a child, and Yawning. Not once, not twice, but 3 times in a row. His mother watches in horror. But the child smiles. And just as the crowd begins to gather, just as someone leans in to scold him, he stands up, bows with exaggerated grace, and runs off into the dusk, giggling. You stare after him because, let's be honest, you're starting to get a little sleepy. You're wandering the quieter corners of the Subura, now Rome's chaotic, half-respectable district where philosophy meets fish sauce and half the buildings lean like they're whispering secrets. The city breathes easier here, away from the stifling grip of imperial protocol. But even here in the tangled alleys and smoky taverns, the yawn ban is beginning to slither in. Someone sneezes an innocent, sharp little sneeze and 3 people flinch. You duck into a public bathhouse, partly to rinse off the imperial absurdity, partly to see how Rome's flesh-and-blood citizens are coping with this newest madness. The air is thick with eucalyptus steam and mid-conversation sighs. Naked senators shuffle past slaves, philosophers soak next to barbers, and everything smells like ambition and mineral salts. And right there, painted across the bathhouse wall and elegant, slightly smudged Latin, to yawn is to offend the gods of decency. Underneath, someone scribbled a response in charcoal. Then may the gods learn to laugh. You smile. Rome hasn't lost its bite. Something emotional, tiredness, boredom, dissatisfaction. All things a good Roman wasn't supposed to show. And eavesdrop on a conversation between 2 older men soaked to the chest in warm water and mid-level resentment, especially not in public. Especially not to his superior. They sent him home with a warning scroll and a sack of pine cones. Said to chew them whenever he feels disloyalty rising. Now, here's the thing, the Roman Empire didn't have the same boundaries around bodily functions as we do today. A boy across the room accidentally yawns and immediately dunks his head under water to disguise it. A woman nearby turns her stretch into a prayer gesture. Everyone's adapting awkwardly, creatively, desperately. They were oddly casual about things we might blush over: communal toilets, spitting, even vomiting as a casual dinner table reset. Not a full law yet, but a growing collection of expectations scrawled across the empire in that tight, paranoid script. You see a new poster outside the bathhouse on your way out. But somehow Yawning pushed them too far. Why? Because unlike burps or sneezes, which could be blamed on external forces, wind pepper, bad shellfish yawns revealed something internal. It earns him a few silver coins and a very stern look from a passing senator. That's where the line was drawn, not on bodily function, but on perceived intent. You sip a watered-down cup of honeyed wine from the edge of a tepid pool. It used to be a body was just a body, one says, swirling his fingers through the steam. Quiet at first, subtle, and that happened, but it's there. The elite, for example, have developed ways to dodge the rules. You learn that upper-class citizens are now hiring private yawn coaches, seriously, who teach them how to disguise yawns as breathing exercises, sniffles, or strategic sighs. Now it's an accusation. An artistic sneeze, he called it. Nothing more. The other nods. My cousin yawned in line for the census. A new drink has emerged, vinegar mixed with mashed olives and honey. It's supposed to shock the tongue into wakefulness. It mostly shocks the stomach. Every time he tries, something ridiculous happens, his mouth gets stuck, birds fly in, he hiccups instead. The audience howls with laughter but keeps glancing around for guards. She kisses the child's forehead, whispers something soft, and the child giggles and yawns. Did it work? He got splinters in his gums. A whisper from the inside out. No fear. Just joy and fatigue and trust. You soak a while longer, watching the steam rise and curl like lazy ghosts. And above it all, Emperor Tiberinus keeps watching. You overhear one of the Empress' advisors complain that public occultations, the Latin term for yawns, have spread like fleas in a market cloak. There's talk of forming a new group within the Vigil's Rome City Watch. Not for fire, not for theft, but for drowsiness. You know he's issued new guidelines. Let it be remembered, true Romans keep their mouths closed and their loyalties firm. Tiberinus was stern underneath it. Someone has drawn a cartoonish figure with an enormous yawn and labeled it True Roman 5 avant. There's a sense of slow building resistance now. The street performers have picked it up. You walk by a group of actors in the Forum performing a comedy about a man who forgets how to yawn. And in the far distance, a fiddler plays a lullaby that ends with a single, exaggerated yawn sound drawn from his violin. The idea of yawning has become theater, but not everyone's amused. Back in the palace, paranoia is tightening. You picture a unit of armored men sneaking through the streets, inspecting faces for signs of fatigue. It sounds absurd. But so did the cucumber tax. And yet, as always, there are exceptions to the madness. One senator even commissioned a scarf made of peacock feathers designed to flutter dramatically every time he opened his mouth. Meanwhile, in the back alleys and taverns, Rome's everyday citizens simply try to stay awake. One bar advertises it as Tiberinus tea. You try a sip. It tastes like betrayal. And finally, as the sun sets and Rome glows like a bronze dream, you walk past a shrine where a young mother holds her child close. A real one, no shame. No one punishes him, no one scolds. You pause. Because in that moment you understand something the emperor never will. Yawning isn't just a bodily function. It's a message. It says, I've done enough today. And maybe that's the most Roman thing of all. You're back in the Curia Julia now. Rome's Grand Senate House is space that smells like ambition, sandal sweat, and the slow decay of power wrapped in tradition. Tall columns loom over rows of marble benches, and every time someone shifts, their toga sighs with them. It's like watching a flock of self-important pigeons trying not to molt in public. But that's not the show. The real performance is the absolute circus of not yawning that unfolds over the next hour. Today's topic, grain distribution. You watch as senators squirm beneath the gilded ceiling, trying very hard to look fascinated by flour. One senator gently pinches his own thigh with a silver stylus. Another stares so hard at a corner of the room that you suspect he's astrally projecting into a livelier dimension. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was mourning the fall of Troy. But no, that man's just sleepy. A third keeps sipping vinegar water, one of the Empire's new favorite anti-yawn potions, grimacing with every swallow. But staying unyawned. Because if Lucius goes down, the rest might have to actually stay awake without tricks, and nobody wants that. You admire their dedication. You also pity them deeply. Then you spot the true master, Senator Lucius Cestius, who has perfected what the court's begun to call the silent yawn. A rule not yet written, but already obeyed. It's a strange little move that involves half swallowing, half sniffing, and slightly squinting while tilting the head as if pondering something deeply tragic. The end result is convincing enough to pass for serious thought, and subtle enough to avoid punishment. When a scroll carrier trips near the dais, a collective gasp ripples through the room, half out of alarm, half out of hope that maybe, just maybe, the meeting will end early. Each scribe is assigned 3 senators to monitor. Every twitch, jaw flex, or deep sigh gets recorded on a scroll labeled Signs of Fatigue, Session 24. He's doing it again, now hands folded, lips tight, eyes dreamy. The funniest part? Everyone knows, everyone sees it. But no one says a thing. That's the reality of Senate life in the age of Lex Occitanus, the yawning law. It hasn't been fully codified yet, but it's already living in the room, like a ghost. Or a bad smell, and somehow it's made everything more theatrical. You've never seen so many aging men shift so nervously over so little. No such luck. How did yawning become a legislative issue? Instead, the emperor's personal envoy steps forward and announces the next topic, the moral decay of visible fatigue. It's disrespect, a microscopic rebellion. A reminder that you are human, mortal, and occasionally uninterested in long discussions about canal dredging. A senator 2 rows ahead of you mutters, "That's rich," coming from a man who sleeps with his eyes open and still finds us for blinking too slowly. No weariness, no weakness, no softness. There's a ripple of suppressed chuckles, not openly. But they've turned resistance into performance. Still, everyone straightens up. Every time he feels a yawn coming, he lets it crawl out and wiggle around. The distraction usually works. He calls it my loyal anti-yawn companion. Rome is now a city of pinched cheeks, bit tongues, and citizens walking around with pebbles in their sandals, anything to stay alert. One even offers yawn conversion therapy where your sleepy instinct is retrained into a polite cough or a dramatic gasp. You shift to the back row. where junior scribes scribble frantically not notes about grain or policy, but about the yawns. He yawns audibly at least 3 times a session. Every time he says, "I was invoking Janus," it's a devotional gape. You peek over a shoulder. It reads, Senator Falco, suspicious rubbing of eyes twice. Sent via a trembling herald who looks like he hasn't slept since Saturnalia. Senator Gellius, mouth open slightly during a cough, possible cover for yawn. From this day forward, each confirmed yawn shall result in the forfeiture of that day's Senate stipend. It's the principle, and suddenly the game gets a little less funny. Senator Palio, slouched, may have dreamed briefly. You glance at Palio, he's definitely dreaming. And you wonder, how did we get here? In a society that celebrated blood sport, public urination, and wine before breakfast, how did this simple gesture become the enemy? Because yawning in this new imperial narrative is more than boredom, and Tiberinus the Stern cannot tolerate that. He wants the empire wide-eyed and rigid, like statues. It's ironic, really. The more he tries to suppress fatigue, the more visible it becomes. Rome still bustles, still breathes, but beneath the bustle is a strange stiffness now, a city holding its breath. Or at least its jaw. Outside the Senate, you hear rumors of traveling wakefulness tutors, grumpy philosophers who now charge a fee to teach elite families how to blink less and stare harder. But inside these marble walls, the senators have chosen another path, comedy. Oh, they don't laugh. One senator now carries a pet mouse in his sleeve. Another senator's strategy is to interrupt debates with sudden, irrelevant questions. Gentlemen, have we addressed the eel shortage in Campania? Sir, we're discussing temple roof repairs. Yes, but think of the eel's Decimus. He's never fined. Everyone knows the real reason. And then there's old Marcius, the oldest senator in the room who simply does not care anymore. So far it's worked, but then a new decree arrives. Not a law technically, more of a guideline, from the emperor's desk. He unrolls the scroll and reads aloud. Let it be known that the expression of undue sleepiness within institutions of state is an affront to Roman excellence. A collective groan fills the room quietly, of course. The stipends aren't large, but still. You watch as senators pull out their styluses and begin furiously scribbling something. Not protest letters, not petitions. Excuses. Puritan, florid excuses in case they're caught. I was offering a prayer to Somnus. My jaw dislocated temporarily. I was suppressing a burp from improperly fermented chickpeas. One senator even has a scroll that simply says, I do not yawn. You are mistaken. You step outside into the fading afternoon light, blinking in relief. And as you walk past a sculptor chiseling a statue of Jupiter, you notice something odd. The god's mouth is slightly open, mid-yawn. You ask the sculptor why. He shrugs. It's not a yawn, he's speaking with power. You grin, sure he is. You find yourself watching a rooster, not a metaphorical one. A real one. Strutting across the outer court of a merchant's villa, pausing now and then to puff out his chest like a gladiator on laundry day. His tail feathers gleam in the sunrise light. He crows once, twice, and then casually yawns. Yes, the rooster yawns. Nobody arrests him. Rome, the city of marble and myth, has turned itself into a sleep-deprived pantomime. You envy him deeply. Because for the last week, you've been watching humans contort themselves into bizarre physical rituals just to avoid the appearance of fatigue, and now the ripple has reached the schools. You step into a modest lecture hall, somewhere near the Aventine Hill. The walls are cracked, the benches uneven, and the air smells like melted wax and overcooked leeks. But what catches your eye is the sign on the wall. Hastily chalked, nitrogen monoxide oscillating during recitations. Their instructor, a long-nosed grammaticus named Polyan, paces back and forth while lecturing on the subjunctive mood and the importance of proper inflection when reciting the works of Livy. His name is Marcus, and he's about to become the most tragic figure in the history of Latin grammar. But no one is listening to Livy. Those unable to suppress shall write I am fully awake 50 times on a wax tablet, with their non-dominant hand. The class consists of a dozen boys in woolen tunics, blinking furiously. Everyone is watching one boy in the back row. He's swaying. Not dramatically. Just that soft, slow back and forth of someone caught in the undertow of sleep. His eyes flutter. His lips part. And you can see it coming, the great slow-motion collapse of willpower that overtakes even the strongest. He opens his mouth, and just as the yawn begins to form, clack. The instructor slams a tablet down. And how it's turning kids into tiny insomniacs with memorized excuses and trauma around soft pillows. No, he barks, pointing dramatically. No hesitation in the house of learning. She says it's treason, the woman says. Tells her dolls they're being indicted for drowsiness, 1 coin per infraction. By noon, it's full. I caught her giving our teddy bear a formal warning. The class jumps. It makes your eyes water and your tongue feel like it bit back. And I want you to shout, knowledge is energy. Every step of the way. Marcus looks like he's been slapped by the gods themselves. Outside, the teacher says, 10 laps around the atrium. The poor boy nods, rubbing his eyes and stumbling toward the door like a soldier returning from battle. You catch him muttering under his breath, I don't even like Livy. Welcome to Rome's new generation, the children of the yawn age. In taverns and temples, people whisper about them. How they're being trained early. How sleepiness is being framed as moral failure, more like a weary rebellion. A loose gathering of people who believe that yawns should not be feared, but embraced. Middle-aged, sharp-eyed, dressed plainly in a blue tunic with a brooch shaped like a wide-open mouth. She serves you real tea with herbs to relax the mind, not jolt it awake. That fatigue is not failure, it's humanity. They meet in quiet corners, storerooms, old shrines, disused fountains. They read poetry. Share warm wine, but an empire too afraid to rest. Eventually breaks. And this is key, they yawn together in silent unison like monks singing a hymn. One merchant you meet tells you her daughter age 9 refuses to nap anymore. But it's not just the children. You walk past a carpenter's guild meeting where apprentices now wear tight leather straps around their wrist, not for fashion, but to slap themselves discreetly when their heads start to droop. At the bakery, the staff has a yawning penalty jar. Someone's tied a cloth over his mouth with charcoal letters, and in the temples? Priests now light incense infused with mint and vinegar meant to sharpen the senses and please the gods of wakefulness. You try a sniff, so here we are. A city built on conquest, marble, and perfectly engineered sewage now obsessed with staying awake. But here's where things get complicated. Because even as Emperor Tiberinus doubles down on his anti-yawn crusade, Rome itself begins to push back. You begin to hear new whispers-coded phrases, exchanged carefully between tired merchants, bored scribes, and exhausted students. Have you seen the silent ones? Someone asks in a bathhouse. I heard they meet near the Flaminian Gate, someone else says in a pottery stall. You learn through a string of increasingly odd encounters that a movement is growing. Small secret and deeply sleepy. They call themselves the Order of the Open Mouth. Yes, really. They're not a cult, not quite a political faction either. You meet one of their leaders. She introduces herself only as Sabina. We are not enemies of Rome, she tells you. We are its reminder. You ask her what the order wants. Freedom of fatigue, she replies, without a trace of irony. And then, with a soft smile, she yawns. You don't even fight it, you follow. It's the most peaceful moment you've had in days. Later that night, walking back through the streets, you pass a statue of Mercury. Even the gods get tired. You stop, smile, and keep walking. Rome is tired. But it's waking up to something else, not more rules. But resistance. It's just past midnight in Rome, and the city is doing what it rarely admits to doing. Sleeping, well trying to. You walk through the Campus Martis beneath the hazy moon, where even the marble seems to sigh in exhaustion. The oil lamps flicker like they're about to quit without notice. One is clearly fading. His partner nudges him in the ribs with military precision. Somewhere, a dog yawns with a full-body stretch that would make the emperor call for a tribunal. You pass a pair of night watchmen leaning on their spears, heads bowed together, muttering softly. No yawning, he growls. The first man groans. It's the middle of the night, exactly. That's when they're watching. Carved into fountains, scrawled on amphorae, scratched onto coins, Tiberinus's propaganda machine is in full swing. And he doesn't mean bandits. You see it now etched on a nearby column in fresh red paint. Sleep is sedition. Stay bright. Stay Ramon. You've been seeing messages like this more and more. His latest decree, announced just yesterday, officially brands excessive yawning as a behavioral deviation. At public baths, temples, schools, and theaters, even especially at funerals. He's even assigned a newly minted office to track violations, the Bureau of Public Wakefulness. Yes, that's real. A tremor beneath the rhythm. One official report mislabels 3 senators as deceased. Temples forget incense, baths run tepid. The mosaics in progress look like the Tylers gave up halfway through a goat. Its agents wear green sashes and carry tiny wax tablets shaped like alert eyes. Their job? Observe, record, and correct fatigue. A man cried out at one last week, "I wasn't yawning, I was grieving." Didn't matter. He still lost 2 days' rations and got sent home with a pamphlet titled, "Grief is not an excuse for laziness. My legs are awake. My brain is somewhere in the provinces." Shops selling vigil oil, a pepper-infused substance supposed to rub on your temples to jolt you awake, have popped up on every other street. The wealthier classes walk around with tiny brass bells they flick near their ears to ward off the slum. And poets? They've started composing hymns in praise of insomnia. You start to notice how much of the city is now built around hiding exhaustion. But as the city strains harder to stay bright-eyed, something strange begins to happen. Rome gets slower. Not visibly, not all at once, but subtly. Deliveries are delayed. The bread loaves are underbaked. Scribal errors double. He stayed conscious, yes, just long enough to faint onto his colleague's toga and be removed by medics. Rumor says he's still twitching. Everyone is present. No one is truly awake. You step into a bakery at dawn and see it firsthand. A man holding a tray of burnt rolls, staring blankly at the oven as if it personally insulted his mother. "I stayed up all night so I wouldn't be fined again," he mumbles. He yawns loudly. That's the thing about conspiracy theories, they yawn back. Then covers his mouth in horror. You both freeze. No one moves, no one saw. You're safe. A third follows. Then a fourth, no excuses, no apologies. Just exhausted humans doing what tired humans do, for now, but it's getting worse. One senator, desperate to stay alert during a late-night council meeting, drank a jug of mulled wine spiked with powdered mustard and bit down on a bronze coin. And now even the palace is showing cracks. You're called into a midnight assembly, an emergency session of the Prefectus Somni, the emperor's newly appointed sleep czar. The czar is a gaunt man with haunted eyes, who wears a cloak covered in sewn-on rooster feathers to symbolize eternal mourning. He holds a scroll. "We have reports," he says gravely, "that yawning is being used to signal anti-imperial sympathies." He's wide awake, of course, always, or so he claims, a murmur. 3 short yawns in succession, the symbol of subversion. You raise your eyebrows. He continues, "We must respond. With surveillance, with regulation, with you know the truth." He doesn't finish. He yawns. The room freezes. Someone gasps. And then someone else copies the yawn. It's like wildfire. A slow, lazy, irresistible wildfire. The sleep czar shrieks, "Stop!" But it's too late. For 30 glorious seconds, the room is filled with synchronized, indulgent yawning. It is, you think, the most honest moment the palace has seen in months, but then the silence returns. And the punishments begin. You slip out before your name is taken down. Back on the street, everything feels different. You see a line of shopkeepers blinking like owls. You see a messenger asleep upright against a column. You see a priest whispering apologies to his statue after catching himself mid-yawn. The empire isn't falling, but it's leaning. And high above, in the imperial residence, Tiberinus the Stern sits alone in a chamber lined with golden mirrors, his reflection watching him from every angle. They say he hasn't slept in 5 days. They say he drinks mint and vinegar tea from a cup shaped like a clenched jaw. They say his personal guards were replaced with marble statues because they don't blink. But you've seen the scribbled note he keeps hidden in his private chamber. One line written and rewritten in shaking hand. "If I yawn, they win." And still, the corners of his mouth twitch. Just slightly, almost, but not yet. It's festival season, now one of those bloated weeks when Rome pretends it's carefree. Colored banners flap from window to window, garlands drape the pillars, and the streets pulse with music, wine, and arguments about who really deserves to win the poetry contest. But this year, there's something missing. Something obvious? The yawns. You didn't realize how much they shaped the rhythm of crowds until they vanished. Festivals used to stretch on for hours, and by the third chariot race, half the audience would be slumped over in a blissful, half-conscious daze. Old women fanned themselves, children curled up in their parents' laps. And drunk senators leaned back in their seats with soft, satisfied yawns echoing like tiny bells through the air. Now? Everyone's trying too hard. There's tension in every smile. Laughter that ends a beat too soon. Eyes starting toward the green-sashed wakefulness monitors before every sip of wine. Trumpets blare. It's like watching a puppet show for people too afraid to blink. Dancers swirl. Jugglers toss flaming torches in hypnotic spirals. But something's off. If a yawn were blamed. You see a group of flute players clustered in the shade, breathing slowly, one whispering, "Play faster." Even the musicians are panicking. And then sneezes himself off a balcony from pure rage. The puppets are ragged, the jokes juvenile, but the audience? Howling with laughter. The crowd roars. A few clap while hiding their hands in their tunics. You're at the main arena now, caught between crowds and curiosity. He says nothing. Just rubs his temple and turns away. Supposedly infused with rosemary, pepper, and crushed beetle shells, they're advertised as keeping you up till Saturn returns. The emperor seated high above, framed in red silk, surrounded by statues of gods who almost certainly wouldn't pass his new drowsiness rules. But every time he says, "Stay alert," another puppet yawns. Jupiter himself is mid-squat on his pedestal, carved in a permanent yawn. No one's brave enough to mention it. The games begin. Inside, soft golden pastries dusted with poppy seeds and chamomile. "Dream rolls," he whispers. For those who remember what rest feels like, the crowd doesn't lose itself the way it used to. There's no lazy joy, no dreamy awe, not punished, not publicly. But he's gone. You watch as one man in the third row, bearded, sunburned, clearly up too early, accidentally yawns behind his hand. A wakefulness monitor sees it. He leans over, dropping his voice. The man is escorted out quietly. People notice. And so the next time someone feels the itch in their jaw, they bite it back. You can practically hear the molars grinding. Welcome to Rome's first no-yawn festival. But festivals are always breeding grounds for satire, and tonight, satire is awake. Later that evening, under torchlight and baked olives, you find yourself at a street-side puppet show hosted by a group calling themselves the Snoring Muses. The tension drains from your jaw like someone uncorked your face. The show? A very thinly veiled tale about Emperor Temperatwitch, a ruler so obsessed with energy that he outlaws blinking. And best of all, the closing act. One puppet shaped suspiciously like the emperor, complete with furrowed brow and scrolls under each arm, tries to lecture a sleepy crowd. By the end, the puppet emperor is surrounded by yawning citizens who carry him off stage on a pillow. You spot a wakefulness monitor watching from a distance. They're getting tired, too. You head to a side street where vendors push carts of festival sweets, figs, and honey, fried cheese, and the infamous vigil cakes. You try one. It tastes like burnt furniture. A baker nearby notices your reaction. "You want the real stuff?" he says. You nod. He reaches under his cart and pulls out a small bundle wrapped in linen. You pay double. Worth it. Back at your quarters, you eat them slowly, one bite at a time, and you can feel your limbs loosen, your shoulders relax. You yawn, a deep one, lazy, honest, and you realize that's the rebellion, not shouting, not protest, just resting, letting yourself feel tired, letting others see it. Even in a city this sharp, this proud, this architecturally overachieving, rest can be an act of defiance. You stare out at the rooftops, the temples glowing faintly under the stars, and wonder, how much longer can this go on? The empire hasn't fallen, but it's fraying at the edges. Not from barbarians, not from political crisis, from exhaustion. And the more they try to patch it with speeches, slogans, and peppermint-scented tea, the more fragile it all feels. In the distance, you hear a soft sound. A yawn, not hidden. Not punished, just human. You wake up in a hay-filled wagon. It's not glamorous, but it's better than the floor of the tavern where a drunk philosopher tried to convince you that sleep was a political invention. The sun's barely risen and Rome hums like a tired beehive. You stretch slowly and immediately pull the blanket over your face when you remember. Public stretching can look a lot like the first stage of a yawn. And today? Today, you've got a special appointment. You've been invited to attend a session of the Imperial Wakefulness Review Board 1 of Emperor Tiberinus as Snorer. Shinier methods of ensuring the population stays properly energetic. This is where accused yawners, droopers, and slumpers come to defend their honor. Yes, it's as absurd as it sounds. You arrive at a modest stone building on the Palatine Hill. The front has no windows. The inscription above the door reads, "Rows of hard wooden benches face a dais where 3 officials sit in matching cloaks dyed a color best described as alert mustard. They have tiny hourglasses pinned to their collars and blink and sync, which is both impressive and deeply uncomfortable. Let the woke learn to fear. Let the sleepy learn to wake." Inside, the room is silent and unnervingly well lit. Your guide, a friendly bureaucrat named Rufus with massive eye bags and a tiny scroll of mint leaves, whispers the rules. No sleeping. There was an incident. No yawning. No excessive blinking. If you feel faint, sip from the vinegar urn, and if you must sneeze, please raise your hand first. It features a man shouting motivational phrases at a rooster. Muscular, sunburned, eyes red from dust. His crime? Repeated jaw stretching during midday prayer. Why raise your hand to sneeze? You ask, to avoid being mistaken for yawning mid-sentence. He whispers back. You do not ask. The first case begins. A young baker named Livia, who allegedly yawned openly while counting loaves during a temple offering. Her defense? He's placed under yawning observation protocol, which means a junior monitor now follows him for 2 weeks, recording all mouth movements. Last week they fined a man for snoring in a dream. I thought the goddess of grain would understand fatigue. I was up since the 3rd hour grinding barley. The tribunal is unmoved. One of the mustard-robed officials squints down at her. We do not doubt your work ethic, citizen, he says, but Rome demands not only labor but enthusiasm. She's fined 2 silver coins and sentenced to attend a vigor seminar. You glance at the pamphlet. Next comes a builder. He's a goat, he says. That's his job. Officially charged with inciting drowsiness in the marketplace by lying down too charmingly. His defense is simple. The sun was in my eyes. And suggests the owner dress him in brighter colors to discourage the visual tone of rest. But the board cross-examines him for nearly half an hour, trying to determine whether his jaw stretch was a symptom of disloyalty, boredom, or God's forbid philosophical indifference. Eventually, they rule it was suspicious but inconclusive. You begin to wonder how many people aren't being watched. A young woman next to you leans in and whispers, "This is the 5th tribunal this month." It's Sabina again. Leader of the Order of the Open Mouth, she smiles like she's offering you something warm and forbidden. Every rule, every fine, every pamphlet meant not to stop yawning, but to force people to pretend they aren't human. And finally, you arrive at a candlelit chamber no larger than a stable. How did they know? He talked in his sleep. Admitted it himself. You don't even have the strength to ask how that counts. But then something unexpected. There's no ceremony, no lecture. Just rest. The next case is not a citizen. It's a goat. You blink. Yes, a goat, named Pollux. Here we teach people to remember. Its owner, a frail, beetle-eyed man with a tunic that smells like mushrooms, defends the animal's right to nap. The board looks flustered. Technically, the anti-yawn code says nothing about livestock. After a brief whispered discussion, they issue a warning scroll for the goat. You manage not to laugh, barely. The morning stretches on. And with each case, it becomes clearer. This isn't about sleep. It's about control. Outside, the sun climbs higher and the city buzzes just a little louder. You wander into a shady alley afterward to clear your head, and that's when you hear it. A voice, soft, calm, familiar. We yawn to remind the world we're alive, it says. You turn, come with me, you hesitate. Then follow. She leads you down through a covered passageway behind a wine shop. The air cools. The walls shift from plaster to old brick. Inside, people. Dozens of them sleeping. Some in clusters, some alone. All lying on soft mats, wrapped in linen or wool, breathing deeply. Sabina watches them fondly. We call this the first chamber, she says. Remember what? What it feels like to be tired and unashamed. You sit. She offers you a cushion. You say nothing. Just lean back. And for a moment, just a moment, you stop thinking. Stop racing. Stop watching your mouth. And you yawn. Loud, honest, free, and no one flinches. It's dusk now, and the city glows like it's trying to trick itself into thinking everything is just fine. Gold spills across the rooftops. Bathhouse steam catches the last light like faded incense. And somewhere, a flute player hits the same 3 notes over and over like he's trying to lull himself into denial. Quiet, forbidden places full of things Tiberinus doesn't want people reading. A tilt of a shelf, a knock on a clay jar, a whispered password that sounds suspiciously like a sneeze. You descend into the dark, passing through candlelit tunnels that smell like damp papyrus, time, and rebellion. Books that don't preach energy. Scrolls that don't scream productivity. Just ideas. Ideas that breathe. But you're headed to an underground library. You didn't know Rome still had these, not the dusty archives of senators, but actual underground libraries. The entrance is hidden behind a spice merchant's stall. At the bottom sits an old man named Gaius, keeper of the books. He looks like someone who's been up too long and lived long enough to stop caring. His eyebrows are full of dust. His voice is soft as moth wings. Looking for philosophy, comedy, or forbidden sleep patterns? He asks, you blink. There's a section for sleep patterns? Rome used to study rest, deeply. Tiberinus banned that one. Said it undermined the empire's work ethic. There's one delightful fragment from a soldier's letter on the German frontier, said it meant I fought well. Before it got replaced by slogans and vinegar. The truth that a tired people are not dangerous, they're honest. That pretending otherwise is a fast road to madness. Or at least to accidentally declaring war on pillows. It is the body's hymn to its own repair. He winks. You're led to a stack of scrolls labeled Psalmthus. Dream, God, science. We called them the breviaries, he says. Places to read and remember that Rome is not just marble and law, it's us. Flesh, breath, fatigue, laughter. They're all different scribes, farmers, midwives, even a former senator who now helps copy the scrolls. They sit, read, stretch. Some yawn. Each one is worn, hand-copied, and full of curious theories about the rhythm of the body. The role of dreams in decision-making, even the idea that civilizations rise and fall in waves of wakefulness and collapse. One scroll quotes a doctor from Alexandria. If the body can't be disciplined, how do they feel powerful? But yawn is not weakness. You reread that line 3 times. It's bound with thread the color of candlelight. For when the time comes, he whispers. You'd be tattooed on your arm if you weren't too afraid of being detained for subcutaneous disobedience. Heart pounding like you've just stolen Jupiter's private thoughts. Gaius chuckles beside you. What did the author do? Went to sleep. Refused to apologize. Died respected and well rested. You think this man should be emperor. You spend the next hour flipping through scrolls written by natural philosophers, poets, and even generals who wrote odes to naps. We fought all day, ate mud. And when I got back to camp, I yawned so hard my commander slapped me and handed me a wineskin. The room feels heavy with forgotten kindness. One is drooling. None are ashamed. A few city scribes stop showing up to take attendance at the forum. Wakefulness monitors start missing their shifts. One temple accidentally leaves its doors closed all day. There's a quiet reverence here, not just for sleep, but for truth. You look around at the others in the room. Not because it's wrong, but because it's true. No one flinches. Gaius tells you that this place used to be one of dozens. You nod. Then you ask him the one question that's been sitting quietly in your chest. Why yawns? He looks at you, eyes soft. Because they're involuntary. And that terrifies men who need control. He leans closer. But it's the involuntary things that keep us real. Before you leave, he slips a small scroll into your hand. What time? You'll know. That's comforting. In a vaguely haunting way. You emerge into the evening, scroll hidden inside your belt. The city's quiet again. Too quiet. Because that night, something strange begins to unfold. First, it's the bread carts. One by one, they arrive late. Then the bathhouses don't open. And no one rushes to fix it. No outrage. No punishment, just gaps. Like Rome is blinking. You pass a line of street sweepers sitting against a wall, heads leaned back, eyes shut. A few are humming. Are you on break, you ask? One grins without opening his eyes. Call it civic meditation. You laugh. It catches in your throat. Rome is tired, and it's starting to admit it. Even the propaganda falters. You pass a signboard that once read, "Tiredness is treason." Someone scratched out treason and replaced it with, just part of being Romang. You hear whispers, now soft, hopeful ones. They're going to yawn at the amphitheater tomorrow. A coordinated stretch in the baths. A musician played a lullaby at the wine market. The revolution is not in fire or steel. It's in soft eyes, bent spines. Warm bread left unsold. And when you return to your quarters that night, you pull out Guy's scroll. You open it. Inside is just one line. Sleep deeply. The Empire is watching. So give it something to dream about. The next morning, Rome feels different. It's subtle, like waking up and realizing someone's cleaned your room while you slept, but they left everything just slightly off. The streets are quieter, the carts roll slower. Even the pigeons look like they're taking a personal day. You step outside expecting the usual chorus of vendors yelling about olives, sandals, or questionable sausages. But instead, you find a city paused, not dead, not broken. Just stretching, and that's when it happens. You catch your first glimpse of it. He opens his mouth and yawns, loud, proud, arms raised, back arched. A man mid-30s, tunic slightly wrinkled, standing in the center of a crowded square. A full performance yawn. Gasps erupt around him. Not from horror, from relief. Then a woman follows. She clutches a basket of lemons, leans her head back, and lets out a long, slow yawn like she's been holding it in since Saturnalia. Then a child. Then a soldier. And fall of one of the most ancient involuntary acts in human history. And suddenly, the Forum, the same place where just weeks ago yawns earned fines, is filled with the soft, rhythmic rise. It's beautiful. He lifts his citation tablet, but his hand trembles. He looks around, surrounded, overwhelmed not by violence, but by honesty, and deeply confusing to the wakefulness monitors. One of them stands rigidly at the edge of the crowd, trying to blow his tiny vigilance whistle, but it makes a weak, uncertain peep. And then? He yawns. It depicts a yawning lion surrounded by sheep in togas, all resting peacefully under a fig tree. Beneath it, a new phrase. The crowd explodes in applause. One of the musicians even plays a slow flute trill that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. In their place, warm honey rolls dusted with cinnamon and guilt-free. Some baker scrawled a new sales pitch and ash on the counter, just a little one. But it's enough. It's like the entire empire took a breath it didn't know it was holding. Someone in the crowd cheers. Someone else claps. And just like that, the day of the open mouth begins. It spreads faster than word of a good scandal. At the amphitheater, before the gladiators begin their performance, both combatants meet in the middle, raise their helmets, and yawn in unison. At a bathhouse on the Aventine, patrons float in warm water and chant soft mantras. Inhale, exhale, droop. A mural's unveiled outside the Temple of Concord, painted overnight by unknown hands. Tiberinus the Stern hasn't appeared in public for weeks, and rumor says he's become almost nocturnal in his paranoia, sending out decrees by torchlight and pacing. His palace like a haunted statue. But his voice? Oh, his voice arrives loud and clear. Participants will be fined, reprimanded, and where necessary, re-educated. We yawn, therefore we rule. Even the bakeries join in. The notorious vigil cakes are nowhere to be found, soft inside. Like your resolve, let go. You spend the day floating through this strange, sleepy uprising where nothing is forced and no one's pretending. You find yourself back at the Forum by mid-afternoon, leaning against a column as a group of citizens. Pass around cups of warm milk and recite a new poem. Let the yawn rise, unbidden and unashamed, let the lids fall. Let the empire dream again. You close your eyes and smile, and then you hear the drums. Sharp, rhythmic, angry. The emperor is coming. Not in person, of course. Even the birds seem to get the memo, roosting 2 hours early on rooftops with smug little chirps. A scroll is read aloud in every square. By the will of the emperor, the so-called Day of the Open Mouth is hereby declared a breach of civic order. No one reacts. Not out of fear. Through a half-collapsed villa. Across a footbridge to a quiet grove where maybe 30 people lie beneath the trees on woven mats. No speeches, no ceremony. Out of fatigue. A kind, collective refusal to rise to the bait. One man near you mutters, re-educated into what? Teacups? The announcement ends. The crier clears his throat, pauses, and then slowly, defiantly he yawns. Massive applause. The city breaks into soft, delicious chaos. Wakefulness monitors abandon their posts. Merchants close early for rest-based reasons. You run into Sabina again just before nightfall. She's carrying a basket of warm stones and bundles of lavender. She offers you one. It's for the ritual, she says. What ritual? She smiles. Tonight we mark the first true pause. It sounds like a bedtime story, but you follow her anyway. Down alleyways, just rest. You lie down too. And for the first time in what feels like weeks, maybe months, you let your body be heavy, let your breath slow. Let your thoughts tangle like ivy instead of racing like chariots. The world doesn't end. It softens. And as your eyes begin to close, you hear a quiet lullaby rising from a single reed pipe, simple, slow, and full of kindness. And somewhere above the city, the stars blink, one, then another. And then they stay open, steady and calm, watching over a Rome that has finally remembered something essential. You don't conquer the world by staying awake. You keep it by knowing when to rest. You wake to the smell of wet stone and wood smoke. The grove is still dappled in early light, and a few others lie around you, wrapped in cloaks, breathing slowly. No one's watching. Or rather, everyone is, but not with suspicion, with solidarity. Somewhere nearby, someone stirs a pot of something herbal and thick. It smells like thyme, barley, and rebellion. You stretch, and for once, you don't flinch. Delivered in bundles to every major square, stamped with the imperial seal, wrapped in bright yellow ribbon alertness incarnate. A group of city guards nap in shifts under a canopy of grapevines, helmets placed neatly beside them like respectful little pillows. Someone has chalked a new message on the side of a statue. Last night's first true pause wasn't an isolated act. As you wander back into the waking city, the air is different, still quiet, still soft, but pulsing with that strange new energy that only emerges when people stop pretending they're fine. You pass shopkeepers sitting on stools, sipping mint tea with their eyes closed. Better a rested republic than a twitching tyrant. And speaking of the tyrant, the official response from Emperor Tiberinus has arrived. You grab a scroll and unravel it. It reads, Imperial Emergency Directive 73B. All citizens are to report signs of mass fatigue-related gatherings. The use of yawn-related gestures is now a Class C disruption. All dream-related metaphors shall be considered symbolic sedition. Remember, the Empire never sleeps. Neither should you. Not to protest, there's no need, but to observe. Just reminding people that their breath belongs to them. And what you see makes your spine tingle. Public rest circles and something called a nap choir set to perform outside the curia. You let it fall to the ground. You're not alone. Dozens do the same. It's almost comical, these scrolls, these empty threats, piling in the gutter while the city cradles its own exhaustion like a sacred rite. You stop by the forum, not with anger. Not with demands, but with silence, with softness, with sleep. The wakefulness monitors are gone. At least the green-sashed, vinegar-smelling ones. In their place, men and women dressed in simple gray tunics, bearing no weapons, no tablets, only small, embroidered patches on their shoulders in the shape of a yawn. The Order of the Open Mouth has come out of the shadows. You find Sabina standing beneath the arch of Septimius Severus, a thick scroll tucked under her arm, her braid wrapped in lavender ribbon. You're making it official? You ask. We're not taking over, she replies. Carrying blankets, cushions, reed mats. Hundreds, maybe thousands, flow toward the palace steps where the marble gleams under torchlight and imperial guards shift uncomfortably. She hands you a piece of parchment, a schedule. It lists yawn zones, a nap choir. People humming themselves to sleep in harmony. It's surprisingly moving. She pauses, then looks you straight in the eyes. Tonight we make the ask. The ask? Shoulders brushing, hands folded. Eyes shut. We go to the Emperor. You try not to laugh. You're going to show up to the palace and nap at him? She grins. Exactly. A man on your left shares a blanket with a boy who couldn't he have been more than 5, his toy gladius tucked under his chin. By twilight, a strange migration begins. Not a march. Not a protest. A drift. Refusing to look out the window. Refusing to see. Citizens move like water. Quiet, patient, warm. You arrive as the first mats are being laid down. Someone unfurls a banner. We are tired. We are together. It's not even that clever. But it lands like thunder. There are no speeches. No music, no calls to arms. Only coordinated stillness. People lie down in the open square. A woman beside you starts humming a lullaby under her breath, and slowly the city grows quiet and quieter still, until all you hear is the wind stirring the torches, and the occasional glorious yawn. At first the guards hold their stance, rigid, confused, but then one of them drops his spear and sits. Then another, and then another. until even the walls of power look like they're blinking. High above, inside the palace, Emperor Tiberinus paces. Or so the rumor goes. You can imagine it now, him muttering about loyalty, shouting at shadows, sipping his endless vinegar tea, holding back the itch in his jaw like it's a battle cry. And yet, maybe, just maybe, he hears it. The silence. The gentleness. The soft, impossible unity of a city no longer pretending to be fine. Later, long after moonrise, you roll onto your side. The stones beneath you are oddly comfortable now. A child snores nearby, someone murmurs a joke in their sleep. And the empire once a churning machine of command and control rests. Not because it fell, but because its people finally remembered what it meant to be human. And nothing, not law, not scroll, not emperor can outlaw that. The morning after the mass slumber on the palace steps arrives like a whisper. No fanfare, no trumpets. Just the hush of waking limbs and slow stretches as thousands of Romans rise from woven mats, wool blankets, and each other's shoulders. You blink against the pale sunlight creeping down the marble facade of the imperial palace. It doesn't look as intimidating now. A few cracks. A patch of moss. Someone's toga draped sleepily over a column. Regal, sure, but also tired. Like everything else, the people stir. Someone passes out warm barley cakes. Someone else yawns like it's a blessing. No one rushes to leave. The city feels ... lighter. It feels like the aftermath of a feast, except instead of wine and figs, the main course was peace, not fixed, but unclenched. You spot Sabina sitting cross-legged near the edge of the steps, braiding wildflowers into her sash. She glances up and smirks. You know, she says, you sleep with your mouth open. You shrug. Apparently that's a political statement now. She laughs. It's a good sound. You scan the scene, the nappers, the old women brushing sleep from their eyes, the children skipping between puddles with flowers in their hair. And that's when a whisper passes through the crowd like a breeze. Yawning shall no longer be classified as a behavioral deviation. Sleep is not sedition. Rest is not rebellion. There's a message. You stand, blinking. Just stunned silence. The kind that leak out when something finally lets go inside you. No trumpets, no imperial herald in gold leaf sandals. Just a young courier no older than 15 carrying a scroll tied in blue ribbon. Not yellow, not red, or someone did. Maybe it was pressure, maybe it was mercy, maybe he finally yawned. The new color means something. He stops at the center of the steps. Unrolls the scroll. Clears his throat. You read a scroll of poetry from the Library of Gaius that ends with the line, "Even the Senate suspends its debates for the day," which causes at least one senator to reportedly burst into grateful sobs. One woman dreams of flying, but only 3 feet above the ground. One man dreams of being hugged by a statue that says nothing but smells like cinnamon. You share yours too. Something about bread that sings and a goat giving political advice. The crowd hushes. By imperial notice, the boy begins. Rome acknowledges the right of its people to observe natural rhythms of body and breath. The amphitheater hosts a special play entitled The Nap of Hercules. It's 3 acts long and features no dialogue, just a strong man yawning at increasing volumes while being offered progressively fluffier cushions by a chorus of admirers. You hear gasps. Not dramatic ones. He continues, Emperor Tiberinus, by his own hand, declares today a civic day of pause. Markets may close. Streets may still. Citizens may rest without penalty or shame. No applause. Not with pitchforks or chants, but with lanterns, blankets, and soft music. A peaceful, sleepy procession carrying something remarkable. You whisper to Sabina, he actually signed that. She nods slowly. And while you may never know if he did, if the emperor finally let that ancient, involuntary motion break through his clenched jaw somehow, it doesn't matter. Because something has shifted. The city embraces its new pause like a long-lost cousin. Temples remain quiet, hosting silent blessings. The bread lines become picnic blankets. Children nap in public gardens, their parents curled beside them in warm clusters. There are concerts, but only of harp, flute, and whisper singing. It gets a standing ovation from people who are too tired to stand. You spend the day drifting through the city like a leaf on warm water. You nap under a fig tree. You sip mint milk. Sleep is the empire within the self-conquered, not with sword, but surrender. Later, you find yourself in a tiny bathhouse where strangers share their dreams aloud, not to be interpreted, but simply heard. No one laughs, except kindly. That evening, a quiet procession walks toward the hill where the emperor resides, the Great Yawn Scroll. Compiled over the past few days by scribes, children, farmers, even a retired general, it contains hundreds of handwritten reasons why Romans choose to rest. You catch a glimpse of one entry, because I cannot build a wall with shaking hands. Another, because my daughter sleeps and I'd like to join her without fear. And your favorite, because the stars yawn too. When the scroll is delivered rolled up like a gentle thundercloud, tied in lavender and sleep-colored blue, it is placed at the palace gates. No guards stop it, no orders intercept it. It's just accepted. And whether Tiberinus reads it or not, whether he truly understands it or merely folds it into his collection of strange civic artifacts, it doesn't change what has already happened. Rome has yawned, and it didn't collapse. It found itself. As twilight deepens, you return to the grove from the night before. You lie down, wrapped in your own breath, under a sky wide enough for every dream Rome never dared to dream. And as you drift off, you think, maybe this is how empires should evolve. Not through fire, not through speeches, but through softness. Through the reminder that we're all a little sleepy. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. The next morning, you're met with something far stranger than any mass protest or imperial decree. Stillness, not the awkward, guilt-ridden stillness of a city waiting to be punished, but the good kind. The kind that fills the room after someone tells the truth. The kind that says, we're not afraid anymore. Rome, for once, is breathing evenly. The baker on the corner has put up a chalkboard that simply reads, closed until I wake up properly, probably around noon. A few crows roost on the roof of the temple, preening lazily like they've been waiting years for everyone else to slow down. The old underground librarian blinking up at the sunlight like it's something newly invented. Even the fountains burble more softly today. You shuffle along the edge of the forum, unsure of what you're looking for until a familiar figure emerges from the crowd. Gaius, depends on the rules of the game. Did we win? You ask, a new treatise on rest as resistance. He shrugs, smiling gently. You recognize the soft hum of the nap choir, harmonizing in long, sleepy syllables that wrap around the square like warm cloth. You sit with him on the steps of a bathhouse. He pulls out a scroll, not one of the secret banned ones, but a fresh sheet with inky notes scrawled in a mixture of Latinike and what might be sleep-deprived doodles of sheep wearing laurels. There's power in doing nothing, but doing nothing together? That's revolution. One child crawls into her mother's lap, yawns, and is asleep before the next note ends. I've started writing again, he says. You nod. Catchy, not imperial, no sash. Just a tunic, sandals, and a sealed wax envelope. He taps your knee. Across the square, a group of musicians begins warming up not for a raucous performance, but something much slower. The effect is instant. People stop, close their eyes. Some sit right where they're standing. And just as you're about to join them, a stranger taps your shoulder. It's a messenger. For you, he says. You open it. A motion is introduced to build public nap-domed shaded spaces where citizens can legally pause, stretch, or drift off without judgment. Inside is a single line written in that perfectly slanted handwriting you've seen on imperial edicts before. Another points out that all of Rome's best engineers were sleep-deprived when they designed the aqueducts, and look how well that turned out. I have yawned. Satisfied? The crowds are huge. Even a few former wakefulness monitors are spotted laughing and yawning without fear. You read it twice, then a third time. It doesn't say much. And yet ... it says everything. You pass it to Gaius. He squints. Then chuckles. Tiberinus blinked, huh? Or maybe he just breathed. The implications are wild. If the emperor himself has acknowledged the involuntary, does that mean new laws will follow? Will the yawn watchers be disbanded? Will vinegar sales finally plummet? More importantly, will the people keep this going? You find Sabina there, barefoot, sorting a basket of handwritten dream logs. Because here's the secret they don't write in the scrolls. Last night I dreamed the emperor turned into a beam. Revolutions aren't hard to start, they're just hard to keep sleepy. But very powerful. The following days feel like a city waking up the right way, not jolting. Not leaping to attention, but stretching slowly towards something gentler. The Senate reconvenes, but only after they install new cushions. One senator argues that this will destroy productivity. Debate adjourns with snacks and a 10-minute recline. Real rest, the kind you don't apologize for. Meanwhile, young street performers introduce a new comedy act where they reenact past yawning arrests in slow-motion interpretive dance. There's even talk of a new festival. Nothing like Saturnalia or Floralia, something calmer. They're calling it Somnalia, a celebration of dreams, naps, and collective rest. But you can't unlearn what it feels like to be unafraid of being tired. The proposed traditions, not speeches, a citywide siesta. Sharing dream poems in public squares. Electing an honorary nap consul whose only duty is to yawn on command at official events. You can't help but grin. This isn't the realm you were raised to expect, but it's one you're proud to belong to. One afternoon, you return to the old breathery beneath the spice stall. Did you know someone dreamed of flying over the Tiber on a giant pillow? She says, holding one up. I've had worse dreams, you say, like just a bean? Yeah, she laughs until she snorts. A high snorting yawn follows. No one judges. Then her smile fades just a little. Do you think this holds? You lean against the wall. I think it has to. Why? Because we've tasted it now. She nods slowly. You can take away scrolls, you say, ban the words. Burn the libraries, that, is what scares emperors the most. Not swords, but people who sleep without permission. You spend the next morning in a hammock strung between two olive trees, trying to remember when doing nothing stopped feeling like failure. You watch a bee land on your finger. It sits for a second, then zips off like it remembered a meeting. But you? You have nowhere to be. Rome has become a place where not being somewhere is no longer suspicious. You've heard stories. All over the city, there's been a quiet unraveling of old habits. The merchant who once shouted, urgent dates, 1 denarius, now softly murmurs, sweet ones or not. If you'd rather nap. The bathhouse down the street changed its business hours to match the sun, not the clock. A tavern proudly displays a sign, now serving warm milk, bedtime stories, and silence after sunset. But of course, it can't all be lullabies and lavender. Today, there's a meeting. The first official gathering of the newly formed Civic Circle for Balanced Wakefulness, a council proposed by both the Order of the Open Mouth and, surprisingly, a handful of former wakefulness monitors. Now, the benches are padded. The ceiling has been painted with scenes of clouds and snoring lions. There's even a blanket table by the entrance. A place where Rome can figure out together what it wants to be. You arrive at the repurposed basilica, once echoing with tense trials and endless scroll shuffling. It's a full house, all equal here. All tired of pretending fatigue is a flaw. I once detained a man for sighing too heavily while buying lentils. I may have threatened a baby for yawning. Artisans, senators, musicians, mothers, night guards, scribes. The opening speaker is unexpected. Marcus Dentatus, former chief monitor of yawn prevention. He steps forward, still in his crisp posture, but with noticeably softer shoes. He clears his throat. I was wrong. I see that now. I owe you all an apology, he says. I used to fine people for blinking too slowly. The crowd chuckles, he bows his head. A slow, unanimous applause follows. The rest of the meeting is, well, exactly what you might expect from a city learning to move at a slower rhythm. The agenda includes a proposal for rest gardens, open-air spaces with shade, cushions, and silence. A new public holiday called Yawnifesto, where citizens write poems about why they rest. Guidelines for compassionate stillness in workplaces, no more shaming someone for needing to sit. A revised copy of the Codex of Civic Conduct that removes the phrase slouching is sabotage. Someone even floats the idea of collective dreaming, a nighttime gathering where people nap near each other and share their dreams at dawn like breakfast. Historians still debate whether this was inspired by the philosopher Numa Lanius or a particularly odd goat. A few whisper he's still pacing in his chambers, drinking vinegar and muttering about unruly dreams. Either way, the idea gains traction. As the meeting ends, you linger. Something's bothering you. All this change, it's good, remarkable even. But you can't help but wonder, where is Emperor Tiberinus in all of this? He hasn't made another public statement, no more scrolls. No sign of him at any of these reforms. Just a palace that looks like it's started to exhale bit by bit. You step through the side gates still open and wander the halls. Some say he's quietly watching. Others think he's fled to the countryside to escape his own creation. You decide to find out. Because it's time, not for a confrontation, but a conversation. That night, you sneak toward the imperial quarters. It's easier than expected. No guards, no banners. His hair grayer than the statues. His hands resting on the table like anchors. The place is enormous, cold, echoing. You imagine how many nights the emperor spent here, pacing between torchlit rooms, whispering laws into the dark, terrified of what happens when people stop performing their energy. Eventually, you find a chamber door slightly ajar. You knock. No answer, you step in, publicly. And there, sitting at a table covered in half-burnt scrolls, is the man himself, Emperor Tiberinus, not in gold. Not in armor, just a robe. From the collapse that comes when people forget their duties. He doesn't look at you, just says, "You're late." You blink, "Late?" Caius's scroll, the one he gave you weeks ago. "For the argument," he says. "I didn't come to argue." He chuckles. "That's worse." Silence stretches. The Empire is watching. So give it something to dream about. You finally speak. "You've seen what's happening outside." He nods, still not looking up. "They yawn in the forum now, and," he sighs, "I thought I was protecting Rome." You sit across from him. "From what?" "From softness," he says. You lean forward. What if duty includes rest? He closes his eyes. Then whispers, "They don't teach emperors to pause. They teach us to endure." You pull something from your belt. You unroll it slowly. Sleep deeply. You place it before him. He stares at it for a long time. Then finally he yawns. It's small. Unremarkable, but real. And that's enough. You stand. He doesn't stop you. As you leave, you hear the scratch of a pen against fresh parchment. And for the first time, you think Rome might be on the edge of something even more miraculous than peace. It might actually become kind. You don't tell anyone right away. About Tiberinus. About the yawn. About the scroll in his hands, the way his shoulders seem to drop half an inch like a puppet set down. Some moments aren't meant to be shouted from rooftops. Some are just meant to ripple quietly outward like a sigh shared between friends. But of course, Rome finds out anyway. Because by mid-morning the next day, there's a new decree posted in every major square, not delivered by courier. Not read by trembling heralds, just tacked gently to the corkboards of the city, written in a neat, modest hand. No imperial seal. No threats. A baker gives away an entire tray of lemon cakes, declaring a new age of crumbs. And comfort. A grumpy street dog lets a child dress him in a laurel crown and doesn't even growl, but everyone knows. Just a single line. You may rest, as I have now learned to. No name. Tiberinus has exhaled. And suddenly, it's as if the whole city has been holding back tears. A woman in the market reads the note aloud and places a kiss on her son's forehead. They're selling bees near the forum. Already calling it the line of lethargy. He yawned. Rome softens again, but this time without fear of being reversed. You find Gaius back at the breviary humming a lullaby as he shelves a scroll labeled, "Things we thought we couldn't say." He turns to you, raises an eyebrow. "That counts." You nod. Full stretch or just the jaw? You see guards taking turns at midday to sit on benches and stare into nothing. You see less rush, fewer stumbles, more people breathing. Bet it outsells Jupiter by next week. Half stretch, but there was sighing. Let it remember how. He beams. Sabina arrives moments later, carrying a tiny clay figurine of a sleeping lion wearing a toga. She holds it up triumphantly. You snort. It's held in a shaded olive grove behind the old temple of Apollo. Cushions have been laid out. Freshwater bowls sparkle in the sun. Someone's already brewing fig leaf tea. I already bought 5. And just like that, a new kind of art starts to trickle in. Their model is an old woman who once yawned so hard at a tribunal, the judge adjourned early. Even a senator or two, barefoot, carrying satchels of fruit and folding fans. I think I forgot how to just be. She murmurs. No hierarchy, just shared weariness. And shared joy in finally acknowledging it. The graffiti changes less snark, more serenity. One puts on a production called The Emperor Who Blinked First. It's a comedy, of course, features a very grumpy man learning to nap via interpretive dance. Audiences adore it. One wall reads, "You lie back, watching the branches shift in the breeze." Let Rome dream. A group of sculptors begins carving a public monument to the nap choir. Even playwrights are catching on. But the biggest change isn't the laughter or the laws. It's what happens in the cracks. You walk the alleyways and see mothers resting with their babies in the shade without apology. The empire isn't collapsing, it's rebalancing. Later that week, a surprise invitation arrives. You're summoned not by name, but by reputation to a gathering atop the Palatine Hill. It's not a council, not a political meeting, it's a nap. An official one. They're calling it the first sanctioned civic sleep-in. It's invitation only, but half the invitees sneak in friends. You recognize nearly everyone. Gaius, Sabina, Marcus Dentatus in a surprisingly soft-looking tunic. There's no schedule. Just the understanding we rest here. No speeches. You find a spot beneath a fig tree, the leaves wide like open hands. Sabina lies beside you, one arm over her eyes. Sing, you say, but I'm remembering. The group starts to hum. It's not organized. Someone sighs, someone else follows. Before long, a warm vibration fills the grove like the trees themselves are singing. You close your eyes. For a moment, you think of the Rome from weeks ago. The vinegar slogans, the stiff-backed monitors. The fear that if you blinked too long, you'd be labeled unproductive. And then you let it go because it's gone now. Or going, and in its place, a better empire, not perfect, but softer, more human. A place where yawns are not crimes, where dreams are not dismissed. Where even emperors, especially emperors, are allowed to blink. As sleep claims you gently beneath the branches, a final thought drifts across your mind. Maybe the greatest empire is the one that lets its people rest. It's raining the next morning. Not the kind of rain that ruins things, the soft kind. The kind that makes everything smell like clean stone and earth. You sit under an awning outside a tea vendor's stall, sipping something warm and sweet that may or may not contain rosemary, and watching as the water pools along the edges of the cobbled street. You listen, you smile. This feels like a city that has stopped performing urgency. People aren't rushing. They're walking slowly, deliberately, some with shawls over their heads, others just blinking up at the clouds like they've never seen water fall so gently. There's no panic, no vendors yelling about ruined inventory. Just Romans taking the day as it is, sleepy, damp, and peaceful. Behind you, two older women argue about which dreams are more prophetic ones about lions wearing sandals or ones where the Tiber flows uphill. And then you hear a sound that hadn't been heard in weeks. A bell, the imperial bell, only used for official announcements. Or, traditionally, when the emperor wants to speak to the people. You freeze. The sound echoes across the rooftops like a single heartbeat. Within an hour, a quiet crowd forms in the forum. No one pushes, no one shouts. Even the rain has slowed to a polite mist. It's as if the whole city knows something delicate is about to happen, not trailed by trumpeters or purple-robed advisors. And then he appears. Tiberinus, not carried on a throne, just walking. Alone. Wearing a simple, deep blue robe and a look of someone who's finally gotten 3 consecutive nights of sleep. One man sighs in that sweet, heavy way that only happens when someone else says the thing you've been waiting to hear. He steps up to the podium, not the imperial one, the old one. The stone one where philosophers once debated about river taxes and star positions, and he stands there, letting the silence grow. If you'll have me, not as your enforcer, but as your fellow Roman. That stillness was weakness. That if I yawned, the empire would fall apart. Finally, he speaks. I was afraid, he says. You blink, so does everyone else. I thought exhaustion meant disorder. He scans the crowd. But you didn't fall apart, you? Came together. A soft ripple passes through the crowd. A few heads nod. Tiberinus continues. I cannot undo the fines, the fear, the vinegar, but I can begin again. He pauses, then smiles awkward, honest, small. I've written something, he adds. It's not long. He unrolls a piece of parchment, holds it in both hands. To the tired, the still, the dreaming, may you sleep when you are weary. May you yawn without consequence. May your dreams carry you far, and your mornings arrive gently. Rome belongs to the rested now. And just like that, he steps down. No applause, just peace. Because what he's done isn't theatrical, it's vulnerable. You're not sure if it's tears or the weather, maybe both. A man letting go of control, one breath at a time. Someone nearby sniffles. Then a small voice, somewhere in the crowd. I forgive him. And another, me too. And then silence again, but this time not from fear. From fullness. The days that follow are filled with strange, beautiful changes. The wakefulness monitor offices become centers for rhythmic living places, or people can check in not for punishment, but for guidance. It's exactly what it sounds like. A kind of wellness center for the weary. A new civic program is launched. The Pillow Path, a trail of shaded rest, stops throughout the city. Each one staffed with soft-spoken volunteers who offer fruit, blankets, and stories for those who need a pause. Children play a new street game called Yawn Tag. Poets set up booths along the Tiber to write custom nap poems for passers-by. One writes you a piece that ends with, "The world is loud, but you don't have to be." And once a week, every Roman citizen is now granted what they're calling a state-sanctioned soul nap, quiet hour guaranteed by law, enforced only by one rule. If someone says they're resting, you let them rest. Even the Senate enforces it. Mostly. Not everyone adapts right away. Never was, but it's trying. And for once, it's trying gently. And there, just inside, you spot Tiberinus again. Some merchants say they miss the hustle, alone, holding a small scroll and humming. One senator tries to reintroduce a wakefulness loyalty oath, but no one attends the vote. Torches flicker like sighs. You pass gardens where families nap together beneath netted canopies. The streets hum not with industry, but with contentment. There's still grumbling, of course. Rome isn't perfect. You find yourself wandering the city late one evening, just to take it all in. The moonlight kisses the domes. And you realize something profound. The real empire isn't marble and law, it's breath. It's body. It's the people who dare to close their eyes and trust that the world will hold. You pass by the palace gates one more time. He's seated beneath an olive tree. No guards, no ceremony. Just a man who finally found his quiet. You don't speak. You don't need to, because you understand each other now. You both know the city is better when it sleeps. You wake to birdsong and bread baking somewhere nearby. Not the frantic clatter of pre-dawn markets or the bark of military drills, but a gentle rhythm. The city itself humming like a body at rest. Rome has slowed. And in that slowness, it's begun to see itself. You rise from your cot, now located in what used to be a storage room for confiscated pillows, and wander into the daylight. The city smells like basil and rising dough. The streets are dotted with moments that would have been unimaginable just weeks ago. A senator helping a child adjust their sleeping mat in the shadow of a column. A dog dozing across the entry to the old finance building while scribes step carefully around it. A line outside the bathhouse, not because of shortage, but because no one's in a hurry. You make your way toward the forum, passing a group of teenagers in tunics lounging in the sun, sharing dreams like gossip. And then the goat told me I had to forgive the moon, one says. But made of soup, another adds, dead serious. I dreamed I was a cloud. You don't interrupt. These are the future historians of a city finally learning to feel its own heartbeat. Today's event is special. The first festival of Somnalia is officially underway. Organized by the Civic Circle and endorsed by the newly mellowed Emperor Tiberinus, the festival is a citywide celebration of stillness, sleep, and what the Temple of Hypnos now calls soulful surrender. You arrive at the main plaza where booths are set up like a marketplace, but instead of fishmongers and shouty vendors, you find a dream library where people donate the most beautiful dreams they've had, recorded on papyrus and sorted by mood. A snooze tent lined with perfumed cushions or old lullabies are sung on loop in 5 languages. And the personified concept of fatigue. A silent parade moving slowly through the square, with participants dressed as moons, pillows, and at the center of it all, the yawn circle. Here, citizens are invited to gather and yawn in harmony. Gyoas arrives moments later wearing a toga embroidered with small embroidered sheep. It sounds absurd. It is absurd. And it's also perfect. You sit beside Sabina, who's already yawning like a seasoned professional. You ready? He asks. You nod. And at the sound of a soft flute, the circle begins. One person yawns. Then another. Then another. I used to think change meant banners and fire, she says. And like dominoes of delight, it cascades across the plaza until the entire square is pulsing with the sound of synchronized, gloriously indulgent yawning. No one rushes. No one speaks. Just the sound of a city remembering it doesn't have to be on all the time. Later, you lie on the grass outside the theater, watching clouds drift by like retired ambitions. Sabina plucks a reed and weaves it into a tiny spiral. Same, you reply. Turns out it's just naps and patience. Not a tune, just a single note, drawn out like a held breath. She leans back. Maybe softness is a kind of strength. You glance at her. No, you say it is strength, just the quiet kind. Nearby, someone plays a flute. Children dance in slow circles. A priest blesses a pillow. Somewhere an old senator yawns and forgets what he was arguing about. The empire is not smaller, it's just kinder. By nightfall, the stars arrive like guests who know they're late but are still welcome. You sit at the edge of the Tiber, the water reflecting constellations and torchlight. You're not alone. Hundreds gather blankets in hand, slippers on feet to take part in the final act of somnalia, the collective dreaming. They murmur goodnights, they share last thoughts. A woman beside you whispers, I hope I dream of wings again. A man across the path says, I just want to sleep near someone who's not afraid. A citywide rest, not mandatory, not enforced. Just invited. People lie side by side on riverbanks, rooftops, temple steps, and slowly the empire closes its eyes. There are no declarations, no orders, no sashes or tablets or salutes. Just this, the inhale of thousands. The long sacred exhale of a city at peace with rest. Even the torchlight dims, even the dogs stop pacing. Even the Tiber seems to soften. And as you roll onto your side, blanket pulled tight, a single thought rocks you gently toward sleep. Maybe Rome wasn't built in a day because it paused to dream. And maybe that's why it survived. You wake slowly, not because someone shook you. Not because of a bell, a schedule, or a command barked by a sleepless official. Just the sun peeking through leaves. Warm, yellow light slipping over your eyes like a kind hand. The sounds of the city waking up are different now. Not the sharp clank of sandals and armor, but the hush of sandals brushing stone. Of morning greetings whispered over honeyed bread. Somewhere nearby, a flute plays a low, yawning note like the day itself is stretching. You sit up beneath your blanket and realize you are one of thousands. The entire bank of the Tiber is covered with sleeping forms, some still curled up, others sitting up slowly, blinking. No one rushes to leave. It's as if time itself has loosened its belt a little. Sabina is already awake beside you, chewing quietly on a fig. You snored, she says without judgment. You drooled, you reply, fair. Even the birds seem less frantic, chirping in unhurried clusters like they're nesting in a lullaby. You watch together as the city begins another day of post-yawn Rome. Word spreads quickly. The first collective dreaming was a success. A group of masons reportedly paused mid-chisel to compare the dreams they had about sentient marble. Even Tiberinus released a scroll short, simple, in blue ink. Not just because no riots occurred or laws were broken, but because something even rarer happened. People woke up gentler. Across the city, shopkeepers opened later. Citizens smiled more. Now it's filled with cushions, fig trees, and scroll stations where citizens write down the dreams they remembered most vividly. He's learning how to rest with his people. We rested together. That means more than ruling alone. A lot of people wept when they read that, not because it was poetic, because it was human. The emperor isn't sleeping through his rule, and Rome is learning alongside him. You spend the afternoon in the Public Dream Forum, a new space built where the old tax office used to be. A child scribbles, I was a candle, or drawing, or confusion. That's the beauty of dreams. I melted into a river. Everyone floated on me. An elderly man's scroll simply reads, my wife kissed me again. And yours? You write, I dreamed Rome wasn't tired anymore. You tack it to the wall beside 100 others. No one judges spelling. I forgive you for that. They're not for interpretation anymore, or dreams, or softness. They're for sharing. By evening, the city buzzes with a strange excitement. A second message has been posted in the forum, a message from the emperor, but not to his people. It's addressed to ... himself, written by hand, not by scribe, and posted unsigned on the same column where public complaints are usually nailed like angry laundry. It reads, to the version of me that feared yawns. You were trying to protect something brittle. But I'm no longer afraid of rest. The empire didn't break when we slowed down. It healed. May you find peace and stillness. I have. There's no imperial insignia. Just a small drawing beneath it. A pillow sketched simply in charcoal. And that more than any law or Senate speech seems to land deeply with people. You watch as crowds gather quietly just to read it. Some people nod, some touch the column. Some sit beneath it and close their eyes for a moment like they're giving the words permission to settle. You lean against a nearby post, watching. Someone offers you a small loaf of sweetbread. You don't feel the weight of expectation or the fear of appearing too slow. You tear it in half and share it with Sabina, who arrives with a new pillow tucked under her arm. "Gift from the city," she says. "No note?" She shrugs. "Guess we're just allowed to be comfortable now." You bite into the bread. The sky turns lavender. A warm breeze carries the smell of rosemary from the temples. And you realize something strange. This Rome, the Rome of softness and pauses and shared silence, it doesn't feel temporary anymore. It feels built to last. You wander toward the edge of the city as the sun begins to dip. Past the gates. Past the newly painted signs reminding travelers, "Welcome to Rome. Please take your time." Out into the olive fields where shepherds nap beside their flocks and cicadas hum bedtime ballads for the vines. You lie down in the tall grass, staring up at the sky, stars just beginning to stretch. And for the first time in your life, you don't feel the need to prove anything. You just feel still. And in that stillness, strength, not the kind you flex. The kind you keep. Like a held breath, like a quiet vow, Rome is yawned. And instead of cracking, it bloomed. By now, the world outside Rome is starting to notice. Messages arrive from distant provinces, curious letters, official inquiries, and a few very confused ambassadors. One scroll from Gaul reads, "Is it true? You've outlawed urgency?" Another from Britannia simply asks, "How does one join the nap choir and are auditions required?" You laugh when you hear that one. Mostly because the answer is no, auditions are not required. You just need to be sleepy and vaguely melodic. Some senators, still clinging to old instincts, worry aloud about optics, about whether Rome seems weak now. Whether enemies might seize this moment of softness to strike. But nothing happens. No uprisings, no invasions. Not even a threatening whisper. Because it turns out when the most powerful city in the world chooses to rest. The newly instituted rest rotation ensures soldiers take daily afternoon pauses. At first, they grumbled. The world listens and wonders. And maybe, just maybe, wishes it could do the same. Even the legions, once synonymous with iron discipline and 4 agiles, are adjusting. Then they realized you march straighter when you're rested. And the enemy flees faster when your spears aren't thrown by sleep-deprived arms. At the Dream Forum, a new wall is added. This one's for visitors, people passing through the city, leaving their impressions. A trader from Carthage writes, "No one yelled at me for closing my eyes during lunch. I almost cried." A woman from Egypt scrawls, "Your dreams are kind. I'm taking that kindness home." And someone, probably from a nearby village, leaves, "I thought this was all some cult. But I slept next to strangers under the stars and woke up feeling like Rome was my cousin." You can't help but smile at that one. Rome is a cousin. A sleepy, affectionate one. That evening, a public gathering is called in the forum not to pass a law, but to commemorate. It's been exactly 1 moon cycle since the first official yawn. Not much in imperial terms. But in human terms? Everything. The city gathers beneath lanterns hung from ropes, swaying gently in the summer breeze, blankets spread across marble steps. Pillows stack like offerings. Even the statues wear soft scarves. Tiberinus appears again less like a ruler, more like a weary professor who's learned to laugh at himself. He doesn't speak from the high podium anymore. He sits cross-legged on a low platform, knees popping audibly as he does, and simply waves. "I used to fear the quiet," he says. "Now I think it might be the only thing worth listening to." He raises a clay mug of warm milk. To the yawn that changed everything. The crowd echoes him, soft voices rising like steam. To the yawn. Later, you find yourself in the company of Sabina and Gaius once more, seated beneath the newly designated tree of collective breaths, a large, ancient olive tree under which couples have started proposing naps instead of marriage. Gaius reads from a scroll. Not a law, not even a poem, just a list he's been keeping. He calls it the Soft Archive. The first day someone napped in the forum without being fined. The moment the guards fell asleep mid-shift and no one complained. The baby who yawned during a trial and the judge who yawned back. The first dream sent by pigeon rolled in lavender. The quietest hour ever recorded in Rome when even the fountains seemed to whisper. It's not history as Rome used to define it, but it's the kind that matters. Sabina lies back on her blanket, arms behind her head. "We should write a lullaby," she says suddenly. Something with 3 chords and one very long exhale. You raise an eyebrow. For the city? She nods. Why not? Gaius hums a tune. And before you know it, the 3 of you are scribbling lyrics into the dirt, laughing when the rhymes fail and whispering lines to the stars when they don't. Your favorite ends up being rest. Sweet empire in blankets and breeze. The crown grows lighter when worn with ease. The crowd thins as the lanterns burn low. Tiberinus lingers near the steps, not guarded, not commanding, just sitting beside an old woman who pats his shoulder and tells him she dreamed he was a house cat last night. He thanks her. Somewhere a flute plays, someone yawns. And the city breathes in the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but full. Full of possibility, of peace, of all the things that never had room to grow in a city obsessed with movement. Now there's space and softness. And dreams. You've never seen a city fall asleep so beautifully. It's the second collective dreaming, and this time it's no longer just an experiment, it's tradition. From Aventine Hill to the edge of the aqueducts, every rooftop, garden, and portico is scattered with people curling into cloaks, laying out cushions, and sipping warm infusions of honey and herbs. A low murmur of lullabies rolls through the air like mist. This time, no one needs instructions. No public scrolls, no official schedules. The empire simply pauses. And you, as always, are there. Same patch of grass. Same stretch of Tiber, but tonight it feels different. Permanent in a way only softness, strangely, can be. Not because the stars are any brighter, they aren't. But because you know this moment is safe now. You lie down beside Sabina and Gaius, the 3 of you forming a little triangle of warmth and breath. Gaius is already snoring. Sabina mumbles something about her dream garden having frogs with tiny harps. You sit up slightly and see a small procession approaching along the stone path. You chuckle, watching the sky darken. Above, birds coast quietly between clouds. Below, the empire exhales. A small breeze carries the sound of feet, a gentle shuffle, not military boots. It's not a parade, it's a surrender. A sleepy revolution walking softly on tired legs. At the front, Emperor Tiberinus, wearing a faded cloak and carrying a single oversized pillow under his arm. Behind him trail a few citizens, young and old. Rich and poor, carrying lanterns shaped like moons and yawning with synchronized grace. Tiberinus reaches the center of the forum, lays down his pillow, and lies flat on his back in the grass. No guards. No throne, just one man among thousands, looking up at the stars like he's finally figured out what they're for. You close your eyes again. With stillness. Everything about the city is humming now, not with labor or ambition, but with presence. And in that stillness, a dream rises up behind your eyelids, light as a breeze. You're floating. Not high, just enough to see rooftops, watch olive trees sway, hear 1,000 hearts beating in a slow, shared rhythm. Not by a person, but by the entire world. No one commands anything here. No one rushes. Even time seems content to sit and rest its elbows for a while. Later, the dream recorders, the new official role created by the Civic Circle, will transcribe the night. As most common themes, flying over wheat fields with no destination, talking animals offering kind advice, being held, rivers singing lullabies, doors opening into libraries made of clouds, the moon winking and whispering, it's okay to stop. Historians still debate whether collective dreaming has long-term cultural effects. Some say yes. His back cracks loud enough to startle a pigeon. Others say that's just the soporific tea talking. But you know, he toasts the crowd without speaking. It matters. Because Rome isn't resting instead of becoming something great. Rome is great because it finally lets itself rest. When morning breaks, it does so gently, no horns, no marching. Just the slow blue of a new sky and the shuffling of blankets being folded. Tiberinus rises and stretches. He smiles, so does everyone watching. Someone hands him a cup of barley tea. That's the new way of ruling, with pauses. With peace. You walk slowly toward the edge of the forum, the sun warm on your face, sandals soft against the dusty stone. Someone calls your name but softly, like they're calling a cat home. You turn. It's Sabina. She hands you a scroll. On the outside, one word, keep. You open it. Inside, the city doesn't need you to fight anymore. It needs you to dream boldly, so sleep well. And wake kindly. You fold it up. Tuck it close. And with a full belly, a calm breath, and a sleepy smile, You step out into a world that finally remembers how to close its eyes. So now, as we lay our story to bed, take one last breath with Rome. It began with the city suffocating under its own expectations, where yawning was banned. Rest was rebellion, and Emperor Tiberius ruled with vinegar-toned decrees and sleepless obsession. You remember walking those tightrope streets, where blinking too slowly might earn you a fine, and sighs were considered subversive. But slowly, almost accidentally, the empire yawned. When Gaius smuggled lullabies beneath scrolls, when Sabina whispered dreams into sleepless corners, when a city remembered the sacred art of pausing, as he too dared to close his eyes. You were there when the first resistance stirred not in riots, but in naps. You watched as a man in power brittle, blinkless finally gave in, as his shoulders slumped and his breath deepened. And in that surrender, Rome bloomed. The streets filled not with fire, but pillows. The forums echoed not with speeches, but silence. Dream gardens replaced tribunals, sleep became sacred. It curled in on itself like a cat in sun and woke with gentler eyes. And the empire didn't crumble, it softened, slowed, strengthened. By the time of the second collective dreaming, there was no more need to explain. The city knew what to do, and so did you. Sleep well, Romain, you earned it.